Countdown now. Four, three, two, one. What is up, Fight fans, and welcome to the first ever live edition of Sports Not Scrap Report. I am, of course, Jason Burgos, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, the militant, the globe-trotting, the defending champion of the Player Haters Ball heavy middleweight title. And that is Anthony Walker, Senor Hater Beeman. How are you feeling? We're live to the world right now.
I'm feeling very hateful, Jason. So here we are.
So then it's Wednesday. So it's a Wednesday kind of day. It's a usual day.
Yeah. It's just every day. Every day's hate.
This is why I love you. As a New Yorker, as you as a DC guy, if people don't understand, here in the Northeast, we hate. It's just a part of the culture, and hate in a way is also love. So if we
Hate
hate,
is
we love.
healthy. Hate is healthy.
Right. If
Yeah.
the anger, the hate, it strengthens you. It makes you miserable, but you live longer because a-holes live forever, and we're gonna live forever. It's
Immortal. Let's go.
okay. With all of that said, we have so much to talk about today in this live edition of the scrap report. So let's just jump into it because we have a lot of different things. The first thing I wanted to talk about was just kind of the fallout from the main event of UFC London this past week, and it was big because Tom Aspinall, he got injured in his last fight. It was seconds into that fight against Curtis Blades, so it's a weird thing. It's a loss on his resume, but it's one of the weaker losses you can have. He goes into the main event of UFC London after injuring himself in UFC London a year ago, almost a year to date. Crazy too. He beats Marcin Tybura easily, like in less than a minute. Dominant. The question I want to know is two questions for you, Anthony. One is he and Sergey Pavlovich, a fight that needs to happen as a title eliminator. Should it be on the card with John Jones and Stipe Miocic? And then also, I have two questions, so I'll just start with that. Is him versus Sergey Pavlovich the fight that really needs to happen next in the division?
That anticipated heavyweight fight I can think of outside of something that has a historical significance like John Jones and Stipe, or if you throw, Francis Ngannou in the mix as far as, just across the entire sport. The thing is, though, you don't want those two to fight unless there's a belt on the line. I don't want to see Pavlovich fight one another unless there is a belt. And I think we have to keep in mind the strong possibility that Stipe Miocic and John Jones could walk away after their main event against one another.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you have a vacant belt. So then you're going to put Tom Aspinall against the winner of and Sergey Spivak, like he proposed as a contender about like that. It doesn't have the same juice to it. Like, you got to have those two fight for a belt if Pavlovich gets, say John Jones wins, retire, Jones fights Pavlovich, the winner of that then fights Aspinall. It's got to be for a belt with those two fighting next. That's it, full stop. I think they both should just wait to see what happens with the actual title, especially before we start talking about interim talk, because that's no thank you.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. If they can get on the same card here in New York, that'd be fantastic. I think it's a double main event, almost sort of like a.
That'd be great.
Well, I'll be in the nosebleeds again. And everybody will, even though the heavyweights, they'll be very small looking to me. But it's a fight that has to happen, and it'd be cool that it'd be like a mini tournament on the same card if possible, if they can do that. Agree 1,000%. So that goes into my next question, which was Michael Bisping made a interesting comment this week about Tom Aspinall. Unsurprisingly, he's an Englishman. Tom Aspinall is an Englishman. He said that John Jones is the heavyweight champion. He's an incredible fighter. He's incredible. He's one of the greatest of all time. I don't think he can hold a candle to Tom. I think Tom will do the same thing to John Jones as what he did to Marcin Tybura. I don't think there's anyone that can stop Tom Aspinall. He's that good. Now, Tom Aspinall is very good. And I honestly think he'd be an interesting test for John Jones just because he's a good grappler. He's shown really good striking. We haven't seen his chin tested too much. That's always the big question, especially with heavyweight. But is Michael Bisping just being a serious homer? Is he a little too bold? Or in your book of the various options outside of Stipe, which I think that fight is 5 years too late, is Tom Aspinall, is he the biggest threat? Is he the real heavyweight threat if John Jones actually does continue fighting a heavyweight past Stipe Miocic?
I mean, I would say Pavlovich might be the biggest threat in my is that power and his wrestling background, despite the fact that we haven't seen a lot of his wrestling in the UFC. Um, I'll say he's at least a different than
Hmm.
Pavlovich. Like he's so nimble. Like this guy moves like a welterweight, and
Yeah.
that's something that we haven't seen John Jones deal with very much in his career period, including at light heavy. My first instinct tells me that people don't know a whole lot about John Jones at heavyweight. Like keep in mind how gone was, and then
Yep.
the possibility that he's just from a body standpoint totally different. Like we just don't know. Michael Bisping was one a big time homer, like supporting the English guys you'd expect. It's the classic case of MMA recency bias. Also, I mean, they just witnessed Tom on this fantastic performance, and now all of a sudden the historical accolades of Jones don't mean anything, and this track record of 15, 16 years of just absolutely on the floor with everybody just doesn't mean anything. That's crazy recency bias, but I don't think he's. I think it's an exaggerated version of the truth. Tam Aspinall is a particular kind of threat, but I think it's too soon to just start throwing out crazy things like that. Let's see what John Jones looks like. Let's see if he
Yeah.
looks physically in better shape. Let's see if this carries over into a second round, maybe or a fourth minute, something like that before we start getting too crazy about either guy.
Yeah. And I think both of these matchups, let's say hypothetical, it was Time Aspinall, they would check off the boxes for John. Yes, Stipe is advanced in his age. He's been very inconsistent in terms of the amount of time he's fighting, but this is a man who power, as they always say, is the last thing to go. And this is a guy who's always been a heavy hitter, smart IQ fighter at heavyweight. He doesn't get credit for that. Good takedown defense. So it would check off a lot of boxes if Johnson can beat him. And then the big knock on Cyril, and we saw it in person, just no ground game, especially against a guy like John. Tom Aspinall has a very good ground game, be it from TKOs and his ground and pound or submission game. So even if John takes him down, this is a very talented heavyweight who can grapple, and that's just a very different thing than a light heavyweight who can grapple. And especially for John, who is massive for the weight class, somehow can always cut weight and make it and just blow back up to immense size and be often stronger than the people he's fighting. It would be different. It would be fascinating. But moving on from that, interesting topic, weird topic. Pat Miletich is going to make his MMA return at 55 to fight one or I think for 2 or 3 times in the UFC. Mike Jackson, who we all know beat up CM
I think
Punk,
it's 4 times, right?
4 times. All right, 4 times.
I think it's 4 times.
At 30, who's 38 years old. And when I first saw the story posted by MMA Junkie, I was like, who would sanction this fight? And then I saw Iowa. Of course, Iowa. No wonder. Davenport, Iowa. Of course, that's where this fight happened. It's not happening in New York or New Jersey, but Iowa. So, Caged Aggression, a card on October 14th in Davenport, Iowa, is promoting 55-year-old Pat Miletich versus Mike Jackson. Does this give you a worse reaction than my idea of Ronda Rousey versus Juliana Pena?
I don't even know what to feel about this because first I'll just throw this out there. Like I'm cool with Mike Jackson. He's been on my old show on my YouTube channel a couple of times, and we've had 1 or 2 in person. Always got along with him.
This is nothing against Mike Jackson. This is
Yeah.
all Iowa and Pat Miletich.
Yeah, and Pat Miletich is, for lack of a better word, he's kind of an idiot. Like this is someone who, despite the fact that he is a pioneer, and I can't take away his pioneer status, like he's an idiot. Like he says a lot of stupid things, and he involves himself in a lot of stupid, scenarios. Like this is the guy who was boots on the ground and talking about there wasn't violence, and he's not a smart man. Like I've had interactions with him where he said things and it's a consistent thing, just stupid things come out of his mouth. We'll get to see a stupid person get beaten up. That's cool, but the man's too old to be out there. His last fight, I forget who he was, some sort of freak show thing, and he looked awful. Like physically looked. He has no business, despite the fact that he is by far a better mixed martial artist from a skill standpoint than Mike Jackson. In there competing
Yeah.
with someone that's
Yeah.
like 20 years his junior is
Yep.
this is just not smart. This is and this is also like almost feels it's like a poor man's version of what Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington fought when they were supposed to, or
Yeah.
say if the Israel Adesanya happened the way it was supposed to, where you have this mashup of politics and racial
Yeah.
dynamics and everything that bring up a lot of ugly conversations and expose a very dark underbelly to combat sports. It's that, but it's like a carnival version of it. So I mean, I'm sure we'll see the clips of some brutal knockout
Yep.
on soon enough, but I would not pay a red cent to watch.
And it's multi-layer dumb, which is impressive. When you can get multi-layer dumb, that's
Yeah.
taken to a whole nother level because it's the state, it's the city, it's the fighter, it's the promoter. And also what's mind-boggling to me is that in an era post Damar Hamlin, now post Bronny James, where we're seeing young, healthy people have sudden incidences like cardiac arrest and weird physicality and stuff like that. The idea of putting a 55-year-old man who has a lot of wear and tear in his body from fighting, from training, because he was a trainer to top fighters for a long time, a lot of wear and tear in his body. I know he's probably in better shape than most 55-year-olds, but you know what? Bronny James is barely able to legally drink. You know, Damar Hamlin is a fantastic athlete and a football player, and he's not even, you know, it just, these weird things happen. Why even take the chance? This is the kind of thing, or brain damage, or those brain injury. It's just like how there's not someone saying, yeah, bad idea, let's not do this. But then again, that might be a trend throughout some of the things because fight sports is a weird thing because there's another weird fight going on. Weird fight, chill boxing. Chill Boxing is promoting a fight in West Virginia between two 9-year-olds. Two 9-year-olds, they actually have a weight limit, a 68-pound weight limit for this fight between Mason the Viper Maynard versus Landon Pitbull Van Dyke. I mean, come on. Now, again, the natural reaction
Sounds like
is
Dukes of so that's
doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it? But that said, the natural reaction is, what the hell's going on here? This is ridiculous. Why are they doing this? But that said, is this really not too crazy? Because little kids have been in tournaments in martial arts. There's the little karate tournaments and the little kids. I mean, we see them on Instagram videos and they're hilarious because it's so ridiculous. But they're full combat sort of karate tournaments. They're throwing real punches, and it's just one punch. Is it not too far of a leap considering all things? Is it not that bad? I mean, how hard can a 9-year-old hit another 9-year-old even with boxing gloves? Like, should we not get upset? Or is this kind of just that weird fight sports can be ugly and strange and America's a little too violent right now and booking is way too lax in athletic commissions?
I mean, athletic commissions definitely suck. Like, let's throw that out there. That's a consistent thing, as we just talked about with Iowa sanctioning, the Militich and Jackson fight. But I wouldn't even put it on like America being too violent. On MMA for kids in Russia, we
Yep.
deep history of Muay Thai, full on Muay Thai being year olds like they
Yep.
that actually support their families. They're kids that would be in elementary school, but they're kicking the crap out of each other every day and literally supporting their family. So this isn't that far out of the realm for me, but I will say that where MMA, Muay Thai, like the harder martial disciplines, they differ from something like a sport karate or taekwondo. So in a lot of ways, because the damage that's given out and the damage received is a different sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
you can play sort of a light body, right? You can do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but there in theory it can work. Boxing isn't quite just the culture of boxing. It's not the same. You go into a boxing gym and you spar, you're probably going to get your brain rattled. Like that's just
Yeah.
across the board in a boxing gym. That's a typical thing. Now, if they know if you've heard of like Point Muay Thai, and they have a point boxing organizations called IKF. and they put on these tournaments around the US where the the rule is like no knockouts, and that it's sort of like a technical sparring competition. If it's something like that what these kids are doing, fine. I think that actually should be encouraged. So you without really subjecting yourself to a lot of the big danger, concussive damage. But that's probably not, especially in a state like West Virginia. This is where that's going on, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and just a total aside, like a total aside that I got to share because we're talking about boxing in West Virginia years and years ago, right? This is a long time ago. I'm an old man now, but when I was a young man, um, I tried to get into a boxing competition in West Virginia. It was like a tough man thing or something.
Hmm.
Apparently, in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, tough is banned. Like the sanctioning bodies won't
Ah,
allow it. So the closest state
okay.
I can, the promoter would not allow me in the tournament because he didn't know if I was like a town killer or something. I was just going in and just wipe the
Mm,
floor with the town, which by the way I would
yeah.
have, but that's another story.
Oh wow. Okay. Bold as always. It's hate and boldness. I mean, it's a perfect combination. I
See,
mean,
the coolest part about it is this was so long ago that I don't have to back that claim up anymore, right? I've aged out of backing that claim. So yeah, it's true.
mm, fair enough. If anybody wants to test Anthony on the claim, just comments. Speaking of the
Get a time
comments,
machine.
please, if you're liking what we're talking about, please, if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, you're watching it live on Twitter and YouTube now, please like, share, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our Twitter, Sports on Twitter account, comment, let us know what you think of these thoughts. Let's bring it home and wrap it up. We got to talk UFC 291. We're not going to talk about every fight. We're not going to make a thorough, in-depth prediction for every fight. I want to focus on certain fights on what is a very good card, although I lost Paul Costa, which was a cool fight. Um, First, I wanted to talk about Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis fights Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Derek Lewis is the underdog by a little bit, nothing crazy right now, but still underdog in this fight, considering what he's done. Two-time champion, I mean, 2-10 title challenger. It's surprising. He's only 38. He's just hitting heavyweight prime in a way. Would this loss, which would mean moving to 1-5 in his last 6, if he lost to Rogerio, which the odds makers think he's going to, does Derek Lewis ponder retirement? Because he's talked about in the past, he's had the back issues for a long time. If he's not competing, I mean, he seems like a guy that wants to compete for titles, though he seems like a guy that wants to compete. But I never got the impression Derek Lewis loves the sport and loves doing this. If it becomes a thing where he's losing often, does someone like Derek Lewis, does he ponder surprisingly retirement at 38 years old if he drops a 5th fight in his last 6 on Saturday?
I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. I think he might consider retirement. For him, I would imagine the only keeping him doing it is just maybe the love of fighting and definitely the paycheck, which I imagine is going to be less and less likely to be thing for him considering his placement on the card. Like Derek Lewis,
Yep.
win or lose, you would always be placed prominently on the card because you knew it was going to be something exciting. And you knew
Yep.
that something crazy was probably going to happen, right? But he is buried on the prelims here. It's not even the featured prelim, whatever that means. It's not, it's not like the opening of the pay-per-view card. It's pretty
Yep.
just mixed in with the rest of the fights. And it doesn't stand out if you're not looking for Derek Lewis's name on that bout sheet. So
Yep.
I don't think, especially in this era in the UFC, pushing out a lot of the guys who command an actual paycheck in
Yep.
the contender series, conveyor belt of fighters. I don't think Derek Lewis is going to have much of an option to stick around in the UFC, if he loses here. And I imagine that's probably going to be better for him anyway. Um, those back issues have caused him a lot of problems, and he's everything else, and it's hindered his training in a lot of ways. But man, Derek Lewis sounds like the perfect guy for like a BKFC. It's like the sort of guy that
Yeah.
would
Yep.
thrive in sort of this circus boxing world, right? And the training would be much easier on his body instead of the
Yeah.
wrestling and the jujitsu and all the grappling and the clinch work and whatnot. To just do some pads and do technical work as a boxer, gloved or ungloved. much easier on the body. I mean, this is the whole reason why Anderson Silva, the proposed fight with Fedor Emelianenko in Bellator, because he just didn't want to do MMA training anymore because it was too tough on his body. So he wouldn't box Jake Paul instead. I see Derek Lewis following a very, very similar path with a loss here.
And the sad thing is, I mean, he just, because we were talking about Francis Ngannou a few weeks ago, and the leverage he had by being a champion, and he can go in and possibly make 8 figures now in this fight against Tyson Fury. Like, Derek Lewis does not have any leverage, especially if he loses fight. And I don't know if his contract is coming up or not. It may not. And the UFC loves holding on to names too long and throwing them out there in tough fights too long. And he is a name, so they may keep on pushing him out there. But when contract time does come around, his leverage is kaput. I mean, especially if he loses, like what's his leverage? Yeah, he's popular, but they got a ton of those guys, and especially at that division where it really is in a lot of ways dime a dozen. Yeah, Derek Lewis is one of the hardest hitters ever in the UFC division, but there's always another guy that's probably going to be a super hard hitter, fan friendly. It's a tough spot for him, and I think you nailed it. He doesn't have leverage to go to boxing. I don't think anybody wants to see that, but bare knuckle boxing, him versus Ben Rockwell, they would easily make that. That would be an easy fight to make. Or I mean, I could have seen him on a Triad Combat, but it seems like that company has pretty much disappeared now. But yeah, it's a tough thing. I mean, but it's kind of transitioning away from that to another guy who it seems like his career is on the brink. Honestly, it could be argued he should have been out the UFC already. Is Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson now. Yes, lost a bunch of fights in a row. They have been against elite fighters, very good, top-notch fighters. Now, he gets a step down, no disrespect, and Bobby Green at UFC 291. But Bobby Green is a massive, at least as of early this week, a minus 360 favorite. A minus 360, that's a big number for a guy that was a former champion. Bobby Green has never reached the heights of Tony Ferguson. I mean, if Tony loses, and he loses bad, he gets finished again, should this just be an immediate cut? Not a matter of fact, scratch that. Does the UFC even do what they're supposed to do and let him go, cut him? They just cut Tyson Nam, I think, this week, who was a good flyweight. Yeah, he lost, but he's a good fighter. They cut him. Like, will they have the guts to actually do the right thing and take him out of the UFC if especially lost to Bobby Green, who's not a power puncher? Though Bobby Green can knock people out, he's more of an accumulation guy like Nick Diaz. Like, does the UFC drop him if he loses his fight?
I believe so. I believe that Tony Ferguson won't have much to offer the UFC if he doesn't on Saturday. But I question why he was even booked in the first place. He was booked just days after getting charged with a DUI, and I've seen conflicting reports of whether or not someone was injured and whatnot. But it was far from where I am right now is in Los Angeles, where he crashed into a couple of parked cars, and then like a week later he in this fight. It doesn't make sense. Like, he's got real legal issues that need to be and obviously behavioral issues. If this is leading up to legal charges and whatnot, this is not the man that should be getting booked. And regardless of that situation in particular, like, Tony Ferguson needs to have some hard conversations with people that love him about whether or not it's worth it to continue in this. And of course, once again, just like Derek Lewis, who commands, a paycheck compared to some of the newer guys coming in, financially may not be worth it to the UFC to keep someone like Tony Ferguson around, especially if they're not going to deliver when it comes to fight night.
Yeah, it's shocking that he's hung on this long. It's having a very similar BJ Penn vibe. It has that vibe, like he's gonna be saying weird things and doing weird things like BJ Penn and saying dinosaurs don't exist and all kinds of weird stuff. And it just feels like it's going down a bad path. And like this recent issue, he's running with the law, these kind of things. And then put him in there, maybe embarrassing himself, maybe getting more damage to his brain. You worry about CT. It's a messy situation, and it's like it's that classic company kind of squeezing every last ounce out of value out of a fighter instead of just doing what's in the best interest of the fighter. And it's kind of scary. But again, you're watching this live or you're watching this later after the fact on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. If you're digging the conversation, comment, let us know what you think of some of these thoughts. Final to focus on this UFC 291 co-main event, main event. Co-main event's a really fun fight. Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, moving up from middleweight, the former champion, the guy who knocked off Adesanya for a bit there. In my UFC predictions for this week, check it out on Sports Night. I make multiple predictions for this event. I'm going with Pereira. He's a small, very small underdog going to the fight as it was earlier this week, and I feel like Jan Blachowicz was never a fast guy. He often uses wrestling, but he's fallen in love a little bit with his Polish power. Understandably, he's clocking guys and knocking them out. But I think he's gotten a little slower. 39 is not a great age for light heavyweight. Yeah, you can be a little older, but you don't want to be that old. He's slowing down. He doesn't use his wrestling as much, and then he's not as fast as he could be with his wrestling. He was never a super amazing takedown artist and stuff like that. He was always about timing, which is tough at that age. And Pereira is already who's a massive middleweight. Now he's not cutting weight. He's only a little bit younger, but he still just has a different wear and tear in his body compared to Blachowicz. I would think, like, not cutting weight, he arguably should be faster. I think he's going to be stronger than people might expect for most middleweights going up. I just think this is a dangerous fight for Jan Blachowicz. Unless he can get him down, beat him up, and submit him early, I just feel like he's going to be set up for a nasty finish going up for a takedown. It's not going to look good. I'm picking Pereira in this fight. What are your thoughts on this fight?
I agree wholeheartedly with this. Maybe if this fight happened like a couple years ago, Jan walking away with the win, but here it just doesn't seem like it's going to be his night. I mean, Pereira is a really, really, you see him, you're like, how did he make 185? This is a depleted version of him. Was absolutely running the table in glory and knocked out Israel Adesanya. I'm sorry.
Knocked out maybe the best fighter on the planet. Knocked him out late too, not first round.
Yes.
He weathered the storm and got him late.
That's another dangerous thing about him too. Like, he can be losing a fight.
Yes.
All of a sudden, he lands a bomb and it's a wrap. And it's not like he lands a bomb just a Hail Mary. Like, it's still very clinical. It's still very. It's still something that involves a lot of science behind it in order to be successful. And he's able to do this despite being in a deficit, and right at the buzzer, being able to pull these fantastic finishes off. It doesn't seem like a good day for Jan. Like, I imagine too, like, that not having that weight cut and him actually just coming in there without the same level of drain, just being that much stronger, just being like a brick wall. Like, imagine trying to. And then on top of that part too, is that he is a very new face to mixed martial arts. That said, when it comes to particularly mixed martial arts things, to the ground, some of the clinch fighting, to all of those aspects, he's going to exponentially grow. Like, it's not like he's training in a woodshed with, using tapes. Like, he's training with Glover Teixeira, like one of the most, from a skill standpoint, fighters. Like, a guy who, if he didn't feel like retiring when he did, could still be a top flight light heavyweight
who beat Jan.
Yeah, I'm saying, man, I think Pereira is surprisingly strong, surprisingly skilled to the grappling, and it's going to be a rough day for the former champ. Well, for the other former champ, right? Because
I'm going to have to do a lot of rankings edits. I'm going to have to move Pereira from the middleweight to the lightweight because I think he's going to win. I think he's going to be middle lightweight, top 10 real quick. And in that conversation for a title shot. Soon, moving on to a title fight in the main event for fictional and fake title. It's like a WWE title. It's the BMF title. And forget the BMF title. This is one of the rematches, I feel, universally, if you watch this sport and know this sport, this is a rematch we've all been wanting to see. It's probably like 4 years late, but it's still good because these guys are better. That never happens. You have two fighters fight. They put on a great fight. Usually, if they get a rematch, they may not be the same. These guys are better than they were. So it's a different fight in a lot of ways. And that is Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier. I have my thoughts on it, but I'll let you lead, Anthony. What is your thoughts on this amazing rematch for the BMF title in the main event of UFC 291, and who you got?
Man, I don't want to dismiss the improvements, and particularly of Justin Gaethje. Like, Justin Gaethje has massively improved from his patience to the shot selection and everything. He's gotten a lot better, and it's like leveled up even from when I want to say it was like the Edson Barboza fight where he started just fighting differently, and he
Yeah.
could be fight. Well, since then he's leveled up yet again. However, he still maintains a lot of that knucklehead energy, right?
Yeah. He smells blood and he just wants to kill.
And that Rafael, he's not Brazilian. The Rafael Fiziev fight
Yeah.
was an example that like he was fantastic from a skill standpoint and his shot selection and everything, but he still took a lot of shots. He still took a
Yeah.
lot of damage, right? Dustin Poirier has had those sort of drag out fights like the Dan Hooker fight,
Oh yeah.
on,
Yeah.
um, the Michael Chandler fight. I know you think remember correctly, he had a really tough first round in that
Mhm.
one. Poirier at least had a couple of gimmies, right? The McGregor fights were a couple of gimmies, right?
Yeah.
Um, he's taken a lot less damage since they last met. And at some point, and I know I've probably said this a million times, I wrote an article about this possibility years ago about Justin Gaethje just having a race against time when his chin just stops working, right? I got to
Yeah.
bring that argument up again because I think he's going to run into that brick wall. It may not be Saturday, but it might be. And if it is, then Dustin Poirier should win. This is a great fight. I don't like the artificial belt except for the fact that so that's cool,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we don't need the artificial stakes for. It's just a great fight, and I'm very happy to see this. Although Spence Crawford is getting top booking in my household. So
I as a WWE fan, I love that the BMF title is back. I love it. I was there for the first fight. It was fun to see The Rock, Donnie Trump. It was crazy, crazy night. I wasn't in the rafters for that, but I mean, I love it. I'm glad it's back. It's fun. It's stupid. It's weird. Spence and Crawford, great fight. Will not be watching that. I'll be busy watching this. You tell me about it after the fact, but I gotta disagree with you here. This is part of my 2 for Tuesday, or in this case, 2 for Wednesday upset special for UFC 10 to 91. I'm picking Pajeda and the upset, even though it's not that big of an upset in Gaethje. I just feel it. I just feel that's how sports is. I just feel like Dustin Poirier kind of I feel like he's in that Robert Whittaker space. Like it's just something's gonna happen. Like he just had his chances, he had his moments. He's been sitting on the sidelines, and your body can just hold up to it long enough before it just randomly falls apart. And every point you made about Justin Gaethje, I can see it totally happen too. But I just feel like the way fight sports works out, and Gaethje in that fight, I'll never forget, versus Tony Ferguson, he can prove when he feels he wants to be technical, wants to be smart. He's so dangerous because his chin's ridiculous, his leg kicks are ridiculous, his punches are ridiculous. He's been talking like that's how he's going to come into this fight. Dustin Poirier, as good as he is, can take a lot of shots. He can take damage. I just feel like sooner or later it has to end. Either one that's probably what's going to happen. One of these guys' chin's finally going to fall off in this fight spectacularly. I just think the way fight sports are, it's going to be Poirier, so it can set up a trilogy fight down the line, maybe for a title. I don't know, a real title. But yeah, I'm picking Justin Gaethje in this one. And maybe I'm just hoping for a trilogy. Maybe that's what I'm doing. But that's all. That's everything we have on this first ever live edition of Sports Not Scrap Report. Hope you enjoy the show. Again, if you like what we're doing, if you watched it live, if you're watching it after the fact on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know about it. Let us know about future guests we're going to have. We have a new episode coming up also with Gerald Mershart. Great conversation on that one. Please look it up on the Sports Not YouTube channel. I am Jason Burgos. He is Anthony Walker. Until next time, everybody.